Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Again, my name is Lance Johnson. I will be moderating today's session for Warren. What we're going to be doing is a session in which Warren's going to give you some information, and then he's going to jump into a Q&A. And I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of value on the Q&A side of things. So please stick around for that portion, because he'll be offering, some rapid fire answers to all of your questions. We're going to be using the the chat function for the Q&A part of it, and then I'll be moderating it and going through it. Just a point on the questions. So Warren, he is a business consultant, recovering lawyer. I think he might speak to that a little bit as well. But he's definitely not a tax accountant, and he's definitely not providing any legal advice in this particular webinar. And so keep the questions to more strategy around how your business can handle this downturn, how you survive this. That's going to be key. Those are the things that he's going to want to talk about and really provide you guys answers on. Anything around taxes and anything around the legal side of things, I think he's going to try to shy away from on this, just because that's not the spirit or the intention of this particular webinar. So business questions, business strategy, how to navigate through this is really what we're going to be focusing on. So with no further ado, I'd love to see Warren maybe pop on now. There he is. Hey, Warren, thanks a lot for doing this for us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I'd imagine you got lots of clients that are kind of in a little bit of a panic mode. And so so I appreciate you taking the time for us. And just so everybody knows, Warren, he's a consultant. I'm sure he's going to speak a little bit more about his background in that, but he's basically coached clients through 5 major economic downturns or crashes, including SARS. And so with that experience that he's got working with businesses across Canada, across the northeastern US, dealing with crises like this, I think he's going to have a lot of great information that he's going to share, and things that we can really take away as business people and act on them immediately.
I'm going to dive right in. It is absolutely possible to survive and even thrive during tough times, but it requires discipline and thought, as well as some agility and the ability to make decisions and hard decisions. So thanks for making it today. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to review a couple of scenarios that are being forecast and what that means for you. Then we're going to go over the 4 main areas that you can control to get you through this, along with some specific steps you can take in each of those areas. I've been spending some time putting together what I call a COVID planning pack. It's a bunch of tools that are free, and they'll help you do some of the analysis and planning and that kind of thing that I'll be talking about. I really want you to get what you need to get through all of this. Now, if you don't know me, who am I? My name is Warren Coughlin. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm not going to do one of those long webinar bios. I'll just say I've been coaching entrepreneurs since about 2002. So I've seen SARS, the 2008 financial crisis, others when I was an entrepreneur. I was the top Canadian coach for the world's largest business coaching organization for 6 years before going out on my own to help what I call ethical entrepreneurs build businesses that matter. I'm also a serial entrepreneur myself. I had 3 or 4 businesses in the new media space that required navigating the dot bust. I'm a recovering lawyer. You're never allowed to say you're not one anymore. I'm a recovering lawyer, a college professor, and an actor and a theater director. So I've seen lots of people succeed and fail in a lot of different contexts. So we've had a long run without a correction, right? And when you've been through these cycles, you see patterns. So I want to help you anticipate developments and take some action in the face of them. Now, as we go through this, you're going to learn that I tend not to sugarcoat things. So not everyone may like that, but I think you have to know so you can prepare. And the first thing is that nothing I'm about to say will guarantee your business success during this period. I'm going to talk about economic cycles in a second, but the fact is, if you weren't preparing for winter, you may have fewer tools at your disposal, but you still have to take action with what you have. So here's where we are. We've got this little bastard COVID running around. And I'm not here to debate issues about the virus itself. Some say people are overreacting as the symptoms aren't severe. Others say it's going to be like the Spanish flu. Others are fixated on criticizing media behavior. Me, I'm just listening to public health officials and scientists who deal with this every day of their professional lives. And I do believe that the virus can be deadly for the elderly, for the immunocompromised, or with certain medical conditions. And what health officials say is that if we don't take appropriate steps in our behavior, the numbers are such that, the healthcare system, hospitals won't be able to care for all those folks. And as resources get used up to treat COVID patients, those same resources won't be available for what they're normally used for. And that endangers a lot of lives. So I do believe we have a moral responsibility to care for others in our community by not risking exposing them. But regardless of what you think about the severity of the virus itself, you do have to be concerned about the severity of the economic impact on your business. And because people are changing their behaviors as a result of this, it's undoubtedly going to affect you in one way or another. And you have to change to meet that changed behavior. Now, I've seen people take these different reactions to it, pretending it'll just go away or falling into sheer panic. And frankly, neither is a very good response. There are going to be impacts, but you can take action. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on mindset stuff, but there is one big mindset consideration I think I need to share. So this is a fellow named Admiral Stockdale. He was a POW in the Vietnam War. And he made a really interesting observation that people who were pure, I guess what you could call blind optimists in the camps, they were the ones that died. They were sure they'd be rescued by Christmas, and then they were sure they'd be rescued by Easter, and none of that happened, and then they collapsed. Those who survived and thrived lived what's become known as the Stockdale paradox. And this is what the Stockdale paradox says. You must confront the brutal facts of your current reality, no matter what they are, while retaining unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. So that's the mindset to go into this with. You can't pretend things aren't there. So let's look at the brutal reality. Now, one of my mentors, he articulated this. I think it's a really apt metaphor. He says, the economy works in seasons. And we've just been through a very long and very mild summer. And there's a lot of reasons why it was extended, and it related to why it didn't overheat. But that's a long conversation that we don't need right now. But the fact is we had a mild summer, and then we've just had what I call an Alberta autumn, 2 days, and then wham, the snow flies. So we are sliding fast into economic winter while nature outside is moving into spring. But what the COVID crisis is teaching us is that while people plan and analyze, God laughs. Even though the economy didn't require a correction, we're getting one now. And what do we know about winter? Things don't grow a lot. You have to work a bit harder for food, and you have to protect yourself from the elements. So one of the lessons from this, for those of you who haven't been through an economic cycle before, is that the next time there's summer, put things away, because no matter how beautiful the weather is, winter will always come. So, but for now, the big question everyone is asking is, how long will winter last and how cold will it get? Here's me giving my answer. Here's the thing. Anyone who is telling you how long this will last is someone you should run away from. I've heard some people say, it won't hurt my business, or it'll die out once the warm weather comes. Candidly, those are just wild-ass guesses masquerading as opinions. And if you take seriously your responsibility to look after yourself, your family, your team, your customers, they're kind of irresponsible opinions. The scientists don't yet know if it's seasonal. Could be, might not be. Have any of these people who are making these prognostications lived in an area where all sports events, theater events, public gatherings are shut down for a prolonged period? Probably not. So maybe it will resolve quickly, maybe it won't. That means we as entrepreneurs are in a period that is going to test our mettle. How do you make decisions in a context of really massive uncertainty, particularly where bad decisions could cause you a lot of damage or maybe present some hidden opportunities? Because we do know two things for sure about the downward effects on the economy. First, it's going to continue for a while, and second, it's going to end. So let's look at what that might look like. So McKinsey and Company, they did a very interesting and comprehensive analysis just very recently, looking at the experience in China and extrapolating a few scenarios. So the first posits a highly effective containment and public health responses, that have some promising treatment options emerging and that kind of thing. This scenario is also consistent with a seasonal limitation of the virus. In that scenario, travel bans are lifted and tourism and hospitality sectors reemerge by kind of the end of the second quarter. So most of the economic impacts are in the first half of the year. Under scenario 2, we don't see any material reduction in new cases until well into Q2. That dampens consumer confidence, and that causes a global slowdown. But that reduction in new cases sees us starting to emerge near the end of Q3. Under scenario or under scenario 3, there's a global recession well throughout 2020. We only come out of it near the end of the year. Now, which scenario will be the one that prevails? No one frankly knows. However, given that we're into the last couple of weeks of Q1, McKinsey identified, and in my view correctly, that scenario 1's probably the least likely. The only thing that would really increase the likelihood of that scenario is the, as of yet unproven possibility that with spring warming, the virus becomes self-limiting. Now, if that's what happens, beautiful. And if you do the things we're going to talk about, you'll be in great shape. But please don't build your planning around the least likely scenario. Yes, the numbers in China and Korea are tapering off. The social distancing we're doing here in Canada may help us get it under control. There are right now, I just read a report about 10 really promising things that are going on right now that scientists are working on. They're working to get vaccines and treatments. So if they come through fast, we might be in scenario 1. But right now, for you, plan as if that isn't the case. People forget how long, it was a long time ago that we had the last big recession. It was 2008. But what people forget is how long that was. From the peak of the S&P to rock bottom was about 500 days. So this change in the world has happened faster, so it may rebound faster. But again, don't plan for that. But overall, Goldman Sachs, their prediction, they think probably by the end of the second quarter into the third quarter. And one of their rationales for saying that is that this is more like 9/11 than 2008. In other words, it's a crisis from circumstances rather than being the result of a systemic problem that requires prolonged restructuring. So in other words, once people are allowed and confident to buy, demand should kick in quickly. But we're just not sure when that'll be. So at the same time, recognize the unique position you're in as a small to medium business owner. Because you see, there is the economy, but then there is your economy. And your economy consists of that relatively small bucket of customers you need for your business to survive. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 1,000. But your focus, that place that gives you the faith that you will prevail in the end, is in that small number of customers out of the entire economy. It's your economy. And so your challenge is attracting, retaining, and servicing as many of those as possible. And to do that, you have to think strategically about 4 key areas of your business. Now, to be clear, this is different from how I normally teach strategic planning because these aren't normal times. So what I want to do first is just give you the normal approach at a really, really high level so you can see how what we're doing is more focused. So strategy is nothing more than the answer to the question, how do we deploy our scarce resources of time, team, and money to achieve a particular objective? Normally, what you're trying to do is build value or valuation. In this period, for now, your objective is to hold value or to minimize loss of value, unless you're in one of those unique circumstances where you're in a growth poised position. But there are only 3 buckets of activities that will drive all value. So the first is get them to pay. That's everything to do with marketing. The second is cost to produce, which is everything to do with your production costs and your processes that drive efficiencies. The gap between those two is your yearly value. And long-term value is yearly value divided by risk. So when you hear of people talking about multiples in business, what you're talking about is the likelihood that your yearly value will continue or grow into the future. Right now, for a lot of businesses, that probability is decreasing. Most of the times over the past several years when I'm working with clients, the strategic focus we choose has been in one of the first 2 boxes. Right now, for most of you, your strategic focus is mitigating risk. You'll pull tools from those other 2 boxes, but your focus is on managing risk. Now, for most of this webinar, I'm focusing on businesses that are, facing a bit of a hard time or they're worried about getting through it all. But I just got to take a second and say for others, there are some amazing opportunities. If you have a ton of spare cash, there is a lot you'll be able to do. Buy up inventory at a song, market like crazy, potentially buy out competitors or make strategic acquisitions. The question of real estate value isn't really clear yet, but it may be possible to pick up some real estate. And of course, the market sell-offs that we've seen on the stock markets present pretty significant opportunities for people with a lot of cash. As when we come out of one of these periods, usually the spike that traditionally accompanies the end of a downturn is pretty steep, since the sell-offs usually leave stocks priced low relative to long-term value. So if you're in the position of being cash healthy, I just encourage you to avoid exploitative or predatory behavior. We do have to help each other out in this period. Now, normally there's a wide array of options to define and execute a strategy. We don't have time to go over them all now, but in these times, I'm asking you to focus on 4. And it's so important you understand the importance of this kind of focus. During the 2008 financial crisis, I had a business owner who contacted me to meet her at her accountant's office. And the purpose of the meeting was to determine whether to close the business or carry on. And it was a tough decision. We mapped out a recovery plan using these kind of 4 ideas. And it was, frankly, it was hard. It was really hard. But she executed it. They survived. In 6 months, they were on a growth curve. And within 2 years, an international company saw them and bought them. So you can get through this. So these are the 4 areas. There's cash flow management, team management, supply chain, and customer relations or communications. Now, cash flow is at the center of this in orange because it determines what you're able to do in all the other areas. Now, before we go into each of the 4 areas, I'll explain this chart in a second. I know it looks busy right now. Now, it's important that you don't get overwhelmed. So as we go through each of the sections of those 4 areas, and afterwards, as you start to consider what actions you'll take, plot the issues you're trying to address on this chart. This is about assessing risk. It'll be part of the tools that I'm sending you. Anything in green, you don't have to worry about. Things in red become the focus, with some in yellow being looked at where, time and resources permit. The red are, more likely with major impact. So it's the combination of the probability of the outcome and the severity of the impact. So you can see the 3 examples I've got here. In this case, with only 3 weeks of cash reserves, the probability of running out of cash with a business downturn is high, right? And the impact is major. So addressing that issue up on the top right has got to be job 1. High likelihood, major impact. Down in the green, team members leaving. In tough times, it's not like that there is going to be a lot of people hiring. So the odds of people leaving for other jobs right now is pretty slim. But if they did, there'd be a moderate impact, right? But given that likelihood is so low, probably not one you need to consider. Down in the bottom right, if customers leave for competitors, it could be major. But in the example I'm using, we're saying this is a company that has an excellent client relations. So the odds of them leaving for competitors is low. They may withhold business right now, but jumping to other competitors is low. So hopefully you can see how plotting the issues you're facing on this kind of grid can give you some clarity and control. Instead of just panicking and saying, I've got to address all these things, this helps you focus on which issues are the most important. Now, we start with cash flow because, as I say, that informs everything else. You need to know how much runway you have and what you can do to start influencing that. Now, in a normal situation, I'd say that the first step is to just do cash flow projections and then act on the basis of what it shows. In this case, because time is tight for pretty much all of you, there is one absolutely essential activity you have to start this afternoon. And it's this: collect your receivables now. No kidding, no fooling. Soon. If it hasn't started already, people are going to start putting you off if you're not on top of it. Call, write, call again. Depending on your circumstances, you might have to discount for prompt payment or offer something on their next order or stage of a project. Don't lead with that, but be prepared to go there if they're putting you off. At this stage, we aren't worrying as much about preservations of margins as we are ensuring we have working capital. In most cases, threatening lawsuits, I'm going to sue you if you don't pay, that's not going to have much effect right now because everyone knows once a lawsuit starts, there's at least a month before they have to do anything at all, and then more months before anything happens. So that's probably not going to be the best strategy right now, but you can be the squeaky wheel. If absolutely necessary, you might have to look at factoring. If you don't know what that is, it means basically you sell your receivables to someone else, normally called a factoring company, and you sell them at a discount. They give you cash now, and then they go and collect the receivables themselves, betting that they'll collect more than they paid you. Now, it's not my recommended course of action as a starting point because it can be a really deep discount, so it's not the place to start. But if you're having a hard time collecting, it may help you get some cash in the door. Oh, and implicit in this is invoice as fast as possible. I've seen this a bunch of times. Sometimes entrepreneurs get really wrapped up in delivery because they want to retain their clients and do good work, and they delay getting their invoices out. Don't do that, especially if people are taking longer to pay. get your invoices out fast. I'd say, every week have an invoicing day where you're just firing all your invoices out every week. Don't wait until the end of the month. As soon as there's a reason to invoice, do it. Then do a follow-up call to ensure that they got the invoice. Then 5 days before the end of the period, call to see when you can expect the check. The day before, offer the 2% discount for early payment. Make sure you're set up to take e-transfers and credit cards to accept payment if you're not. Because if they can pay you by credit card, it's another 30 days before it has to come out of their bank account. So make it as easy as possible for people to pay you. Now, while you're collecting cash, you have to have a line of sight on what the next couple of months look like, so you can make, informed decisions. So you're all going to get this tool. This is a rolling cash flow projection tool. You don't have to use this tool if you've got others, but I know a lot of businesses don't have it, which is why I'm sharing it. All right, so it's a weekly cash flow projection tool. All you have to do is put in your starting date, opening bank balance, and credit limit on this summary page. And then you'll see in a second, there's a page for cash inflows and a page for cash outflows. All right, now in this particular case, I'm just making this a little bit larger so you can see it. Here we have an opening bank balance of $15,000 and a line of credit of $10,000. Given the inflows and outflows are there, this business is in big trouble on May 18th. All the weeks after that are negative. So without an increase of their line of credit or anything, they're pretty much, bankrupt, essentially. They don't have any cash. Now, so how does this tool help that other than get you depressed? Well, it allows you to start making choices. So if we go over to this cash flow, this is the cash outflow page. What you've done already is you'll schedule when you will be paying out cash to your suppliers or for other costs like wages, taxes, and the like. Now, this is how doing this work helps. Look at this entry right here. Here, I'll make it a little bit bigger. So look at this one expense. Let's just delete that. Now, this isn't a supplier. It's a cost we thought until now that we'd start incurring as of next week. But now we're thinking, really? Do I need to take that one on? What happens if we don't? Well, watch what happens to the cash flow projection. Right down in here. Now, I'm intentionally not showing a rosy picture because this stuff is hard. It's hard work. But when we remove that one expense, yes, we still go negative on May 18th, but not by nearly as much. And then we go positive, and by the end of the quarter, we're even. So then we can say, so what if we were just able to bump our line of credit by just $3,500? Those two changes, getting rid of that one expense and getting an extra $3,500 cash injection, that changes our scenario from being screwed by mid-May to having us survive out into June or July. That's how this tool becomes useful. You start making really concrete decisions based on what the cash flow shows you. And the problem is most business owners don't do this work, and they just start randomly cutting everything, which can have really negative, unanticipated consequences. But when you're deliberate about it, you can make hard but informed choices. And listen, I kind of know of what I speak in this. When my business in the new media industry got hit by the dot bust, we lost, like I say, $500,000 in pipeline business in about 2 weeks. I was doing this exercise not weekly, but daily. I was doing daily cash flow management. Where am I collecting? What do we pay? What do we delay? So believe me, I get that it's tough, but I also know that it's necessary and it can save your ass. So do it. On the inflow side, you also have to be pretty bloody minded. You have to look at your customers, rank them with a high, medium, low risk, and estimate how much you may lose from them. What items on your cash flow should you delete to be realistic? Look at this example. If this one customer doesn't pay, that's $4,000 you're not getting. So on that scenario we just laid out where that $3,500 saves us, that this one customer not paying us just completely reverses that decision making or that consequence. So now if you're retail or a business with individual transactions, you're not going to do it by individual customer, but you can do it by product line, by service line, or by retail outlet, and still do the same kind of projecting. All right, so absolutely do this. It is hard work, but you'll be able to make smart, informed decisions rather than panic decisions. Now, as I alluded at the beginning, you can look at expanding, or in that last example, rather, at expanding your loan facilities. Now, that's not going to be easy for everybody. Banks know what's going on. They aren't stupid. And you need to understand something about banks. People sometimes get mad at banks for not giving loans in high-risk circumstances, But in the market of money, banks that are giving loans are not in the game of taking on risk. That's not what their business model is. They are selling a commodity. Instead of bread, they sell dollars. And how they get paid is through the interest rate for selling those dollars. So they need to know that they're going to get paid when they sell their inventory. So there are other players in the market that accept risk. Banks don't. Generally. Now, there was just an announcement yesterday by the major banks that they're going to be initiating some pretty aggressive programs to help people, both at an individual and at a business level. They're going to be delaying mortgages for people, mortgage payments for people who need it, and there's a bunch more. So, you may want to approach them. If you have a line and a good relationship with a bank and you aren't in trouble, or that you can show that you can cash flow through a bad time, they may extend it. Also, look at some of the relief packages being offered by the governments. Here in Canada, the Feds just announced a $10 billion credit facility will be made available through the BDC and EDC. I don't really know the conditions for that yet. They were supposed to be announcing today a whole host of other relief packages for business and small business. So you're going to have to look into it. Other initiatives are going to be coming. Go after them fast as you can. You may also then have to look at private loans that carry higher interest rates to match the risk. You may have to pledge security. Those are tough decisions, but most people who sell money will say, I'm not going to bet on your business if you're not going to bet on your business. And that's why they want security in tough times. So, those are the tough decisions to make. You may also look at taking on investment. Again, this won't work for everyone. You may not be an attractive investment opportunity, or you may have to give up a lot to get the investment. And if you're not looking to create fast growth or to acquire competitors or develop cool technology, realistically, you're not going to attract venture capital money. But there are angels, family, friends. There's also kind of an interesting hybrid model that most people don't think about, but where if somebody advances you a loan, and rather than, get burdened with fixed monthly payments, you offer them a percentage on every sale. So if you have few sales, they don't get paid a lot. If you get a lot of sales, they get paid a lot. That sees them getting payments right away, but also allows you to manage the cash hit as it kind of rises and falls with sales. Now, generally, you'd have to be willing to pay more for that kind of money, but it is a flexible model if you can find people flexible enough to take it on. Additionally, sometimes you may have competitors, suppliers, sometimes even customers who might want to take a piece of your company for strategic reasons. Be open to those kinds of opportunities, as they may provide you cash now and some good leverage opportunities later. I have one or two clients right now who are actively thinking about acquisitions because they're in solid cash positions. So they know that over the next couple of months, there's likely to be deals to be had that will increase their revenue potential while maybe eliminating some competition on the other side of this. So if there are people in your industry who are positioned that way, you might want to have some conversations about getting some injection of cash. Next, avoid capital investments. I was speaking with another coach the other day. They had a client who just the day before their meeting went out and bought a big truck. And he was like, oh, dude, what are you doing? So don't buy trucks, don't buy equipment, don't do renovations, don't buy new computers, nothing unless it is mission critical in that you can't deliver to your clients. I just had a conversation with a client yesterday who really felt committed to completing some renos. And when I asked her, well, why? It just the question just sort of stopped her. And she said, oh, I guess I don't have to. Yeah, that saved her about $100,000 in cash during this period. Now, at the same time, not everyone is on this webinar, right? And won't get this message. So some of them may still think they should go out and buy equipment. So if you have redundant capital equipment, consider selling it to get an additional injection of cash. Now, there are exceptions to all of this. Again, if you're cash rich and there's great deals to be had to lower your operating costs long term, then go for it. But for most of you, put this stuff off. Now, suppliers and payables. So this is kind of a tricky one. With apologies to the clash, it's, do I pay or do I go? Your traditional advice is extend your payables. And that may, in fact, have to happen. But so because my whole thing is about ethical entrepreneurship and all of that, I'm asking you to be thoughtful about this and apply an ethical lens to it. Just as you want to be able to collect your receivables to keep going, so do your suppliers. And, if you believe in the golden rule, it suggests we do for others what we would have others do for us. So I do understand you may have to. I mentioned in an article I wrote that in my .com business, or the marketing in the .com era, we had to extend payables, but we were very thoughtful and specific about it. We were in special loans with a bank. So we moved from our usual 30 days to 45 days, but we paid religiously on 45 days. And this was at a time where subcontractors were frankly getting screwed a lot. Now that gave us some breathing room from a cash flow, but it gave our suppliers predictability in their cash flows. And while others were lying to them and screwing them, they knew they could rely on us. And it helped us get quality work done in a hurry when we did have work to do for clients. Interestingly enough, also, it did great things for our team loyalty, as they could see we were thoughtful about how we treated others, even while we were struggling. So another piece, traditional advice will tell you to pay the big guys who can sue you or play hardball and push off the more powerless. I'm going to suggest that where possible, you do the opposite. For most, not all, like you're going to have to look at it at a case-by-case basis, but for most large services, you can push off payment for a while and then do partial payments to keep them happy before they pull the plug on you. So if you can, look after the vulnerable solopreneur or small business owner first if you can. They're fighting, to keep someone employed and to feed their family just like you are. But, you got to do what you got to do, but try to think of it through that lens. Now, what about savings through layoffs? Now, I'm going to get into that in the next section on team management, which is where we are next. Now, in dealing with team, here's a fundamental principle. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? Which means in the absence of information, people will make it up and fill it in. And in times like this, they will not fill it in with good information. So the first principle is communicate, and if all else fails, communicate. When we were in that period in the .com era, we owned a recruiting company, and we told our team everything that was going on, and we told the recruiting company to expect people to be looking for work, and we told our recruiting company to not tell us if people are looking for work, and we told the team that we told the recruiting company that. We told them what the bank was telling us. We told them what our clients were telling us. We told them what we were doing about it. And the interesting thing is we didn't lose any employees during that period. And they worked hard because they felt we were treating them fairly. So let's be more specific. Communicate early and often. Even if you're still confused yourself, you can communicate that this is fast moving and changing. You're watching and building plans. Use what I just shared with you about what McKinsey said and what Goldman Sachs is saying. Get info from the CDC or the World Health Organization that's credible, not the nonsense on Facebook, and empathize with their anxiety. There was a study of crisis communication after 9/11, and many employees described how important it was to hear the voice of the leader. So here's some things. If you have a leadership team, some of you are small businesses, you do it all yourself. Some of you have leadership teams. If you have a leadership team, you have to meet regularly to discuss any changes, team morale, customer feedback, and critically coordinate your messages, with honesty, so that people aren't getting mixed messages. Mixed messages create fear. The leadership team all has to be singing from the same song sheet. Post information visibly. Use bulletin boards, emails, Slack, internet, whatever you have to do. Make sure that there's no vacuum so that people know what's going on. In terms of frequency, do it a lot. Things are moving fast right now. I had lunch or a coffee with somebody on Thursday where we were talking about doing something on Friday, and the next day everything changed. So, you should be updating people no less than every day. Educate your people. There's still just nonsense, misinformation out there. Get the best info you can. I still see some people saying, oh, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. And explain and over-explain, right? The hows and whys of your decisions about working from home or not working from home, about travel restrictions, about clothing, about cleaning, about marketing, about your cash flow projections and what you're doing about it, about layoffs if there are any. Don't leave a vacuum for people to make things up, and just give context. Don't wait to know everything, right? You don't have to wait on the facts. If you don't know, say you don't know. If nothing's changed, say nothing's changed. People will respect that you're including them in the conversations. And by including them, give them a voice. Often leaders seek to over-explain and kind of, quote, handle people. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen. Allow people to vent, to share, to question, to suggest. People will have anxiety. Let them share it without judgment. Listen to their ideas. Many of them are on the front lines and may see some things you don't. I have a client just yesterday. We came up with this idea. She's using the downtime to challenge her teams. They're actually going to have a contest as to how they can use their core skills, this core skill sets this business has, in new and innovative ways that may open up new business opportunities. They're going to have a pitch contest within 4 or 5 weeks. This excites the team rather than just scares them, as they get to have a say in their own future. Now, not everybody gets to do that. She's in the fortunate positioning. Her business has been hit, but she, was planning for winter and had some cash reserves. But make sure your team gets to say. Be confident and inspiring. Show your plans. Be up. Show your frustration and fear elsewhere. I had a client during the SARS crisis, and her entire business, her business was organizing and bringing groups to Toronto for entertainment events. If you remember that period, Toronto got nailed with SARS. Her business was just getting crushed. And at one point, I was her coach, and I asked her whether she wanted to continue with me coaching her in light of the circumstances. And I'll never forget it. She said, "Oh my God, you can't leave me. This is the only thing that's keeping me sane." I was the outlet for her. She felt a therapist wouldn't understand the business context, and she had to let her fears and worries out somewhere. So you can do that, but don't do that with your team. They need you to be the leader. They need you to be strong. They need you to be confident and, painting what the future looks like. Now, at more tactical levels, when I was first putting this presentation together, it wasn't mandatory. So we were going to talk about telecommuting. Now it is becoming mandatory in a lot of places. There are some exceptions, and not everyone can do telecommuting or working from home. If you have a machine shop or pest control or home renovations or other physical work, this doesn't work as well. Some are closing anyway. Others are trying to find ways to keep going. For those that do have people working at home, it's just not enough to say, okay, work from home, right? A lot of creativity and problem solving happens in the hallways, in the lunchroom, over the proverbial water cooler. How do you encourage and facilitate those kind of interactions now? How do you ensure work is getting done? You have to plan this out. When will you meet? What will you use? Zoom, Slack, Skype, GoToMeeting? Who will set it up and chair it? What are going to be the rules of meeting and reporting and updating on projects or work? How will progress on work, be managed? What will managers be responsible for reporting and getting from team members? How will you track time if that's part of your model? What about mail and banking? You got to ensure phones are forwarded to the right people. This could go on for a while, right? So you got to do the detailed planning. You can't just sit back and go, well, people are going to work from home, or we're going to figure it out. And when you can give them the plans, this is what we're doing, that will give them more confidence as well. Now, if you are working, or when people return to work soon, we're hoping this period of isolation doesn't go on too long, and when you can get back to work, what you're trying to do with this idea of teaming is consider how you keep the entire organization from going down if one person does get sick. There are projections right now that 30% or more of the population will contract the virus. Goldman Sachs, in their report, they projected 50%. So if teams are separated, if you have like one team works over here and one team works over here, then if one team has to isolate, the other teams can keep working and the whole business doesn't go down. Now, there's different ways of doing this based on the business. It could be shifts. It could be separate physical workspaces. Could be different areas in the business that you've got separated. It could be crews that always go out on jobs together and not mix up your crews. It could mean avoiding having all team meetings, and therefore that requires a doubling up of some meetings with you. Now, doing this ensures some continuity of service. Now, related to this, if it's relevant in your industry, have a list of prioritized subcontractors. Now, this can be in consulting, event planning, management, even medical services or other service or professional businesses, labor businesses where there are crews that can be subcontracted. If there are competent people out there, contact them now to let them know what's happening and that they may be needed, right? That can help you continue even if some of your team has to take time off. Now, from a process level, that will require you to ensure that your team are keeping great status notes so someone else can step into a project. That's one of the system things that has to happen as you have people working from home. Now, there's obviously the hygiene rules. You need to support people from staying at home People need to be encouraged to be honest about that, right? It's costly for people to not get paid when they have bills, so what are you going to do about that? Paramount Foods, the owner of Paramount Foods, he's paying staff when they stay home. A client of mine is covering food costs. These are for people who are staying home, not because of this isolation period, but if it goes back to normal times and someone contracts the virus, you need to encourage them to stay home. So a client of mine, when that happens, they're covering their food costs. Some have discussed covering rent or partial rent. There could be a team matching program, right? But that would really depend on the strength of your culture. But those are some of the things that can help when people have to stay home. In your workplace, you have a no-touch policy. Ensure that there's hand washing. Have a 10-foot rule. The science is outside of 6 feet, you should be safe, but make it a 10-foot rule. Disinfect all the time. If there's symptoms, you stay home. And as I say, you got to provide that support for staying at home. These hygiene rules can be a big deal. I've got a client that is in sort of the wedding business, and they provide wedding garments, and introducing a whole bunch of these rules, as well as how many people can come in at a time, what happens after each appointment, they can make customers feel more comfortable. On the other hand, you spent time building a good team. If you lose some, you'll have to rebuild. You also want to be in a position to deliver to customers when work does come in. And, then there's a question of personal loyalty. I know many entrepreneurs really struggle emotionally when letting people go, when those people have been loyal, hardworking members of the team. So let's look at some ideas. So first is, before you decide to lay people off, start with that cash flow projection. Look at what you have and what you need and what you're able to get by on. Look at what else you can cut first. And then look at alternatives to layoffs. Now, on this, lawyers and HR people on the line may drop their jaws and get mad at me. So you got to go out and get appropriate advice on this. Part of what I'll say is, in these kinds of circumstances, maybe all the traditional rules won't apply. And you can always maybe talk, afterwards with whatever government officials. But one of the things is, ask people to take vacation time now, rather than later. There's an open question legally. Can you require people to take vacation time at a given period? Not sure, but you can at least ask, right? And that can save people's jobs, because you don't have to pay while they're on vacation if that's the way your compensation is structured. You can do reduction of hours, right? You may have to cut back hours. You may ask for agreements for salary cuts. Now, this legally can be considered constructive dismissal. There's an argument that people can't contract out of their rights, especially under pressure-packed circumstances. They could consider that undue duress. But you can see what your team is willing to accept as an alternative to layoffs. I had one client during the 2008 exercise or period where the team on their own decided to all take pay reductions rather than have some people lose their job. They just said, we don't want anybody to get laid off, so we're going to take a reduction. That's kind of cool, right? You may also consider working notice rather than layoff. Normally, you give what's called pay in lieu of notice. In other words, you say, I'm giving you, say, 4 weeks now of pay, and you leave now. Alternatively, you could say, I'm telling you now that your last day will be 4 weeks from now, and I'll keep paying you until then, and you keep working until then. In these circumstances, that can be framed authentically as, we don't know what's going to happen. I want to keep everyone. I want to keep your job, but I have to retain all the options. So rather than lay you off today, I want to see what happens in the hopes of keeping you. Now, the reason HR folks say walk people out the door on the day you're laying them off is so you don't have a disgruntled employee hanging around doing damage, potentially. In this case, since you're actively trying to preserve their job, depending on the person, it may actually be appreciated, and you can stretch out the dollars rather than have to pay a lump sum up front. If you do have to do layoffs, there's a few things to consider. One, maybe you offer a little bit of a bonus or a little extra for anyone who volunteers to take a layoff. Again, it doesn't work everywhere, but some people will jump at it. They get their pay in lieu of notice, and they can start EI or employment insurance right away, which means they'll get roughly 1.5 times their salary during that notice period. So if you're doing that, you might be able to negotiate paying out the notice checks over time so you can manage your cash flow. Now, all of this really only works if you've been open, fair, and communicative throughout. Use this as an opportunity to move out those folks you wanted to move out anyway. When we come out of the other side, you should be able to pick up some solid new employees, so you end up with a more high-performance organization. And finally, listen, if you conclude you have to do layoffs, this is actually really important and it's hard. Do it all at once if possible. It's painful, but it's ripping off the Band-Aid. Do it fast and hard. Cut deeper than you think, so it's only once. If you're laying off one more person every week or two, it's just a death watch, and you just leave everyone constantly afraid. On the other hand, if you say that was deep and hard, but no one else is leaving, everyone else will be in and they'll be committed and they'll work hard and they won't have to feel afraid. All right. Next is the supply chain. In the same way you're thinking about how to handle all of this, so are your suppliers, right? They could lose business and have to close. They could be hit by the virus and have to temporarily suspend operations. So what happens if there's a break in the supply chain? That means there'll be a break in your ability to deliver to customers. At a time when you want to protect your client relationships, that's something to avoid. And by the way, this isn't just for physical supplies. If you rely on outside subcontractors to deliver work, like outside creative directors or work crews or writers, this applies to you too. So what do? You got to ask their plans. What are they doing? Have they stockpiled? Do they have teams split up so that if one team is disrupted, others can fill in? How are they adding to their protocols to minimize the impacts of infection? You can order extra now, but that's subject to your cash flow analysis. Don't go order a bunch of inventory if you don't have, the money to do it. You actually want to, increase your inventory turns. But if there's a supply concern, you may have to. But don't do it with toilet paper. Look for alternative suppliers now. Who knows? That may actually help you in the long run by finding new and better suppliers. Also, maybe think about geographically diverse sourcing, not just from one country or region. Everybody who got all their supplies from China, they were running into some problems, right? Everyone is concerned about keeping business right now. So you might be able to negotiate better terms. It might be the right time to negotiate. And notice I'm saying terms, not just prices. That could mean payment terms, volume requirements, add-ons, material or ingredient options, packaging, delivery times, as well as rates. You could leave this period with better supply relationships on better terms once we get to the growth phase later on, but it means being thoughtful and intentional about it now. All right, the last area is, customer relations, customer communications, which is really about marketing. How are you dealing with existing customers and prospects? It even means how you deliver what you offer. So, nature still abhors a vacuum. So the first principle is communicate, and if all else fails, communicate. But communicate what's relevant to them, which means changes you're making in how to do things should be communicated. If you've created new protocols to keep people safe, let them know. The client I mentioned in the wedding outfit business, they're creating a whole new protocols on how sample garments are handled and cleaned, about how the environment is disinfected after each visit, about trying things on at home. That is going to be communicated loud and far. JetBlue, the airline, they were the first airline to waive change and cancellation fees. That gave them some temporary reassurance to customers. I have a client that does a type of environmental cleaning. It's still a needed service as spring comes, and so they've decided to use their full respirator masks on all their jobs, even though they usually only wear them when using certain chemicals. They're communicating that with customers to avoid cancellations and delays. If people see that they're completely safe, then they can still use them. So whatever you're doing, communicate. Now, in addition to that, what's changed, or what are you changing? The world has changed. You have to change with it. The people who are going to be in a problem just think, I'm just going to hunker down and do what I've always done. There's some things, every business can look at things a little bit differently. I've had 3 clients this week who were basically in this, it was so interesting from a mindset standpoint. They were all kind of just giving up in a way and saying, well, we're just going to hunker down and ride it out. And I said, well, hold on a second. We got active and we came up with a whole bunch of new initiatives that are going to keep them going. So you got to be a little bit creative and think about what can you do? So, your hygiene protocols are likely to be new and you have to stay on top of them, and you might have to change your product offerings. What do people want more of? For instance, I've shifted from long-term strategic planning to 30 to 60-day intensive cash flow management and surviving crisis planning, because that's what business owners need right now, and I have some unique insights to help them. Event or meeting companies might tap into technologies that allow for creative ways of conducting events. That might be online, there might be some other ways. I know churches are doing live broadcasting with no live services. Maybe there's maintenance services or long-term maintenance or service contracts that you can offer. There are bookstores in Vancouver that are delivering books. There's free delivery for seniors. I have a client in the kind of sweets business, and they're looking at having senior-only hours first thing in the morning. They're looking at having booked appointment times in their store where there will only be a max of 5 people at a time, all 10 feet apart. Or, offer delivery for people now. Restaurants, drugstores, clothing stores, even medical and therapy services can be online. If you do have to go into people's homes, it's not going to happen right now over the next couple of weeks, but once that kicks in again, put up plastic sheeting around work areas if going into homes, right? With pre and post total disinfecting of your work areas. Have people show up with, clean or new coveralls that they pull out of the packaging and put on outside the door. Have hip holster hand sanitizer. All these are just new ways of delivering the service that provide reassurance to your customer. Think about pre-ordering, to help with cash flow. Offer discounts to buy services now to be delivered later. So there's a lot of things that you can think about to make it more comfortable. You may also need to pivot. Look at industries that are doing well. I've got a couple of clients who this is what they've already started talking about that as of Monday. They're looking at other industries that seem to be doing well, that need what they offer. Consultancies, toilet paper companies, some news agencies, chemical companies, medical service, technology companies, some media companies, online education organizations, online companies selling essential products like diapers and bottles and kids' games and puzzles and so on. Right? So you can look at how to pivot into new areas. Do you change your products? There's a distiller in Niagara who's making hand sanitizer. Actually, there's a bunch of distillers all over North America that are doing that now. Now, this guy in Niagara, I really like him. He's doing it for free for police and healthcare workers, but I'm sure he's going to find a market for it as well. Do you change your business model? Subscription-based, different payment terms, a different delivery model? When we come out of this quarantine period, you do at-home massage, online ordering if not there yet. I've actually spoken to some people in the entertainment world about, people who are putting plays together and concerts together, about live streaming performances behind paywalls to supporters of the arts. While people are at home, they need to do something culturally interesting while being at home. People are going to get sick of Netflix. You could, instead of pivoting, just add on target markets. Home renovation may have to move to supporting new home builds or rebuilds. As we come out of the, quarantine period or shutdown period, look at different geographies. Right now, the social distancing that's being recommended is across the board. Once its effects are realized and the restrictions come off, we're likely to see that there are areas less affected by the virus, right? So there may be opportunities to look elsewhere. You could start exploring underserved geographies right now. So in all of this, get creative, innovative. The way things have been done isn't the way they have to be done. As I say, just this week with 3 of my clients, we developed really cool, new, innovative approaches to keep the business going after they were thinking of just shutting down or dialing back. So, don't give up. So now let's talk about marketing. In the world of online marketing, there's some really interesting things happening. Here's a couple of charts shared by Neil Patel. Now, this first shows the week-over-week changes in online search traffic. This is pretty interesting, right? Because except for a few key areas that people are worried about, finance, food, healthcare, pharma, and media, interestingly enough, because people are looking for information, everything is down from organic search. Now, it also has an impact on conversion. So even when people are looking, they aren't buying. Conversion is down pretty much everywhere except in those same areas. Now, here's the thing. Does that mean you should stop marketing? Hell no. What it means is you can no longer rely on people looking for you and finding you. You have to get out to them. So that's why I reiterated, communicate, communicate, communicate. You have to market like mad. As things progress, lead generation and conversion rates are likely to both decline. That means you need to engage in more activity to generate the same business. So get on it now. Have clear and compelling offers. That doesn't just mean prices, all the terms. What else do they get? Free maintenance contracts, extra revisions on creative, more consulting time with the owner or designer, better delivery timing, upgraded membership. What do they value that you can give them? All right. As part of this, I was actually just speaking with a bunch of leasing agents this morning, and one of the things that happens there, you think people, well, nobody's going to be looking for new rent now. Well, look at the life of a potential landlord. They're looking at April and May of having a whole lot of rent checks not collected. So imagine you're the one that's phoning and saying, hey, I've got somebody who wants to rent space from you. They're going to do a good deal with you, right? So for the lease agents, is like, get out there to people who may be in good shape, who are thinking of expanding or moving their offices, because this may be the best time for them to do it, right? So what do you value? What do they value? Now, as part of this series, this webinar today is the first in a series. This is my take on stuff. What I'm going to wind up doing is also bringing in a series of experts where I'm going to interview them in areas like marketing and HR and legal and all that kind of stuff to help you through that. As part of this series on Tuesday, Lance, who you met at the beginning with Ampli Media, he's got a really great approach to marketing and generating results. So I'm going to be doing an interview with him on Tuesday. So I'd ask you to really, participate in that and keep coming back to these webinars to get the help you need. And Lance is going to have some really cool things to say. Now, I'm going to risk pissing off some agency folks right now. Maybe Lance will be mad at me too. But for the most part, brand marketing isn't a good use of your cash right now. You need sales. There are exceptions, right? If you know there isn't much business right now and you have extra cash, you can do work to position yourself well for the other end. Or if your brand identity is weak and you have cash, you may engage in a brand refresh. I have one client in that position, and we just decided yesterday to get on with that. But if you have a tight budget, use it to get clients. And so I'm not saying don't do any. So for the agencies who are mad at me right now, I'm not saying don't engage in marketing or advertising. I'm saying make it super targeted. That's more along a direct response model where you present clear offers that people can take advantage of. If possible, use some no-cost, low-cost methods, referral strategies. Ask for the type of client you're looking for. Get involved in sales. Lots of people are going to have some extra time. I talked to some people today who were in sales, and they were like, I'm actually getting a lot of good conversations with people because they have time. Don't just buy into this notion that everything is bad and no one wants to talk. Call them, set up virtual lunches, talk about long-term needs. Engage in education marketing, create webinars, articles, white papers, offer to do virtual lunch and learns for their teams while they're working from home. You can do that with Zoom or Webinar Jam or all kinds of different technologies. What you're doing is you're positioning yourself as a valued expert, and you'll begin deepening relationships for when they do buy. And through education, you can come up with ideas for what they can do right now. Strategic alliances. Who has the same target market as you? What can you do together? Can you offer 50% off at a neighboring hair salon if they order delivery from your bakery? Can you co-market your lawn care business with the deck painting business as a package? Share each other's lists. Social media. If you're doing things new, tell the world. Take a positive stand. Do something in the community. Show that you care. Show that you're confident. Communicate how you're wanting to still add value, and do it a lot. There's so much fear and negativity and people arguing as if they're infectious disease experts. To have a voice that says, we're here for you, can be really compelling. And then if you do have budget, if you do have cash flow, do some targeted media buys. If you have the money to do it, just make sure you have good metrics and testing so the investment will produce a return, even if the sales cycle is long. But, do it carefully. All right. So that was a lot. I'm sure some of your brains are getting full. We're nearing the end time. We're going to go probably an hour, 7 minutes, probably all. And maybe where you need to focus your efforts. Anything that's on the lower half, you should just basically ignore. So anything you're thinking of doing, plot on this grid, and that'll never possible. Vent elsewhere. Help. Be a person of help. Help your team. Help your customers. Help your suppliers. It'll give you a sense of, and there's, whatever works for you, journaling, meditating, gratitude, talking to people. Get help or support. There's no shame in asking for help, either emotional support or business help. Now, I have no expectation that after a jam-packed webinar like this, you're going to be able to remember and implement everything on your own. So I put together some tools to help. It's all free. There's nothing you need to do. It's stuff I use with my paying clients, as well as a few things I've developed just for this. So I've called it the COVID Planning Pack. My usual strategy development tool is called the Business That Matters Playbook, but that's way too long-term, comprehensive, and robust for where we are right now. So I've created the Planning Edition. And a couple of them I have to show you. So one is let me just give you the list first so you can see what's in it. So you're going to get a financial dashboard, which I'll show you in a second, a discount and volume calculator that'll just show you more or less the impact of pricing changes, a sales formula white paper that'll just help improve your sales skills while you're out there. And in the playbook itself, the cash flow projection tool that I showed you will be in there along with instructions on how to use it. The risk matrix that I showed you before, the prioritization matrix grid that I just showed you, and a 90-day planning tool. So first, let me just show you the financial dashboard. So what this does, it takes all three of your key financial statements, your P&L, your balance sheet, your statement of cash flow, combined with your number of staff and payroll, and it does a bunch of slicing and dicing. You can see across the top all the different tabs that you can be looking at from the different financial statements. Then you can see that it shows comparisons over the last 3 months. It does it over the last 2 quarters, and it does this year compared to last year. And this is critical as it's the trends that matter and the numbers don't lie. So it shows where the trends are in the right direction or not with green lights and red lights. And it shows you all the information graphically so you can get the picture fast. It's a really incredibly powerful tool. I use it with all my clients, and it has a projection function so you can quickly see what happens to your profits when certain changes happen. So you'll want to use that. Next is a tool that shows you how much volume you need to make up in sales for a given discount, or how much business you can lose with a price increase. Now, right now, you'd be pretty gutsy raising prices. So this is more for those doing or considering price drops. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't discount at all, but this is just a way of pressure testing what a price drop will do. And then to help you focus your thinking with all the stuff I've talked about across the 4 areas, what I've done, I've put together about 50 questions among the 4 areas that we've talked about. Your answers to those questions will clue you in to actions that you should consider taking them. So the little blue boxes will be where you'll write the actions that you're going to take. And then from there, you'll plot them on the priority grid so you get the basis of a plan. So you're not just left from the webinar saying, oh, I got to think of all that stuff he said. You're going to answer the questions. That'll zero you in on what's important to you. And then finally, you have a 90-day planning template. At this time, it doesn't have to be 90 days. I'd say just do it 30 to 60 days at tops. Beyond that, it's just too hard to see into the future right now. But based on what the cash flow and the questions indicate, you're going to choose a couple of priorities, identify what you want to achieve, and then schedule the tasks. So here's just a quick example of what I mean. So the strategic priority here is to manage cash flow. The first goal is to have cash flow projections. There are a number of tasks then listed, and then you just highlight the weeks in which it will be done. Now you'll see there's also a spot for who's accountable. This plan becomes your boss for the next 30 to 60 days. Yes, you're going to have to go in and modify it as new information and events unfold, but it gives you the framework for your decision making so you just aren't bouncing around reactively. Okay? Use this tool and you'll have more confidence and control to get through this. Now, there's an additional option, and I told people in the quote marketing for this webinar, there's not going to be any big sales pitch, and there isn't. But at the same time, from conversations I've had with people, there are some people who want to know if or how I can help them. I'm going to open up for Q&A in a minute, but I am going to share something I've developed to allow people who want some support. This isn't a salesy webinar. I just really want people to get whatever help they need. If you know you don't want to hear about it, just hit mute. I'm going to put up a slide with Marcus Aurelius when I'm done, and you can rejoin then. It'll only be a couple of minutes, okay? So I imagine there are a number of folks like my clients who this week who kind of froze or who only saw limited options and who are concerned about navigating all of this alone. And I recognize that my usual long-term kind of coaching arrangement isn't going to fit with what some people need right now. So here's what I'm doing. It's just a 5-week gig. It starts with a group orientation. So anybody who wants to do it, we'll all meet, and there'll be a group orientation to all the tools I just went over so you can know how to use them quickly, including the cash flow projection tool. Then it's going to be individual coaching thereafter. It's just a group for efficiency to get taught. And then I'm going to meet with each of you individually to review your cash flow projections and your questionnaires. From there, we're going to develop a 4 to 6 week plan that you'll be able to execute. And then I'm going to meet with you for each of the following 3 weeks to ensure that the steps we put into place are getting done. So that'll take us out into mid-May, where we should have a way better line of sight on what comes next. Now, I'm not doing any phony scarcity play when I say this. I only have capacity, because this is one-on-one stuff I'm going to be doing with people, for about 15 people. With my existing client base, that's frankly going to be pushing it, but I want to try to help as many as I can. So with reviewing financials like this and that number of meetings, I would have to normally charge about $3 to $5 grand for that. But I know that's too big a hit for right now. And since I decided on Friday to do this webinar, I've really gone back and forth and come to the conclusion that I can do this for about $947. I know the clients I've been working with the last couple of weeks have found way more hard dollar value than that out of our work together. So if you're uncertain what to do next, I encourage you to do this. I think Lance will be putting up either in the chat box or in the offer page a link to where you can go to sign up for that. You can contact me directly as well.
Yeah, I'll just interject here real quickly, everybody. So in the offers tab, you'll see that in the webinar dashboard there. There's an offers tab. You'll see a little graphic and a link to the registration page. So click on that. And yeah, so 15 spots available. But to tell you the truth, Warren, I think we need to drop that down to 14, because I definitely am taking one of those spots for my business. And so if I can get mine in advance of everybody else's, I'd appreciate that.
Alrighty.
So 14
Thanks very much, Lance. So
everybody.
Register if that sounds reasonable. There's no pressure. There's not going to be a bunch of marketing afterwards. It's just we're going to be working through the tools that I just gave you. All right. That's it. We're going to do Q&A in a minute. I leave you with this. I'm a fan of the Stoics. That's a particular kind of philosophy. They have a lot to say to us at times like this. The things that seem to be opposing us just may be the things that allow us to be our greatest. Marcus Aurelius said this: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So let this crisis show you a new way of doing, and more importantly, a new way of being. And let's just make sure we're looking after each other out there during this period. So I'm going to open it up to any questions now.
Okay, everybody. So thank you so much, Warren, for providing all that great information. The chat room has been really busy throughout. I know some of you guys have said that you've had some problems with the signal dropping. That's simply because Webinar Jam, which is the platform we're using, and every other jam is just crazy busy right now with everybody shifting meetings online, and so capacity or their throughput is a little compromised at this point. So if it ever drops out, just hit that refresh button and you're fine. So there's a question right now: where do I sign up? In the chat. So if you go to the offers button, again, you'll see the registration button. Just click on registration and that will get you to the sign up page. If that's not working for you, go to warrencoughlin.com/COVID-action-plan. Okay, so that's Warren Coughlin, COUGHLIN.com/COVID-action-plan. Okay, I'll put that URL in the chat as well. So as far as questions for Warren, let me see here. For service business, should we continue to
I think it means our standard.
Or standardize lead? Sorry. Yeah, continue our standard lead follow-up process, timing, or slow down out of.
So I don't think it's a matter of
speed
or timing. It's more messaging, right? If you're contacting people to buy a service-based service business that isn't necessarily what they need right now, you can still be contacting them, but try to be as helpful as possible. Like I mentioned in that lease brokerage exercise, instead of saying, hey, you should hire me to get your new space, it's like, how can we help, be of service and help you now? If you can come up with ideas to help people right now, you can definitely propose that. Or you can say, we're planning for May or June when we know people are going to come out of this. You'd absolutely have to be sensitive to where people are at right now. I've heard some salespeople say they've had some people get mad at them for calling, but that's because they were using their traditional sales pitch and just doing it as if nothing has changed. If you change up your messaging that takes into account the considerations that's going on, and you're showing sensitivity to their circumstances and trying to help, a lot of people are actually being really receptive right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Warren. And that's something that we'll be covering on Tuesday a little bit as well when we get into more of the marketing aspects of it. And just so everybody knows, we will be sending out an email with the registration link for that free webinar as well. And it's going to be more of a Q&A session. We're planning on doing a bunch of these over the next few weeks with all sorts of different experts. I get to be in the hot seat for the first one on Tuesday. But there will be lots of other topics that we'll be covering off. So keep an eye on your inboxes. And like Warren said, it's really about the approach when it comes to communicating and reaching out to prospects. I've been, approached by quite a few different companies that are still got me in their prospecting cycle, and most have been really respectful, and I've shared time with them for sure. So I appreciate that approach for sure. Another question, Sarah, she was just wondering if you could go back to the slide there on the to-dos. She said that it froze on her screen at the time there, Warren, and so she's just hoping that you might be able to throw that up. So if you can add, she said here, after the prioritization matrix with some to-dos.
Which one?
So if you want to navigate back to that one. Yes, I believe that was it. Is that correct, Sarah? So we'll wait. We'll just leave that one on screen while Sarah confirms whether or not that is it. So a question then that Sharon has. She said, "Hi, Warren. It's been
Sharon.
36 years. Glad to see you're doing well. Sounds like got some history there. Yesterday, our HR team was discussing temporary layoffs, and we determined that this is not the time to use the temporary layoff measures to pick and choose and eradicated poor performers. You spoke specifically about messaging and communication and reducing fear. As HR professionals, it is important to take this time to do what is in the best interest of the organization. Use this time to financially plan and then be prepared to act following the relative temporary layoff period."
I agree.
Your thoughts?
If I understood it all properly, yes, HR professionals in the organizations, there's really two mandates that they're going to have right now. One is managing the current workflow, but to be responsible, they're going to have to look at long-term HR needs as we come out of this. And it's a tough consideration, again, because we don't know where we're at, like how long this is going to last. But if they did massive layoffs and all of a sudden it ticks back up again and they've got to service clients, that becomes a challenge. So you've got to do two levels of HR planning, right? And so you've got to do what you can get away with now and what you're going to need later. And so you should have, as part of it, if you are doing layoffs, you should be building in a recruitment strategy or recruitment plan at the same time so that you know what you're going to need on the other end of that. If I understood the question properly, that's, a couple of considerations.
Excellent. And I just got an update here from our team behind the scenes. They said we've already got 6 form entries, registrations there. So they're going to go fairly quick. So if you are interested at all, make sure you get into that offer tab there and click through on the registration link, or use the URL that I just added to the chat room here a few minutes ago. In terms of additional questions, does anybody else have anything else that they'd like to ask Warren at this particular point in time? If
not, you can always reach out to me by email. It's at warren@warrencoughlin.com. And like I say, happy to help out any way I can. If you want this COVID planning pack that I've got up here, it will be coming to you. It's not going to come immediately when the webinar ends. There's just a couple of little fine tuning I need to finish on it. This whole webinar got put together super fast, but it will be sent out to you either end of day or tomorrow at the latest. And if you're wanting to participate in, getting this additional help, again, this is what's involved. We get the 5 weeks, group orientation to all the tools, individual review of all your cash flows and questionnaire, development of a 4-week plan, maybe a 6-week plan, and then 3 weeks of me sort of leaning over your shoulder and kicking the pants a little bit to make sure you're not freezing and taking action.
Yeah, accountability is huge. And so, that's the whole idea of having a coach, right? So it's one thing for us to actually know that we have to create some of these plans and have to go through that tough analysis and decision making, even if we have the tools. It's another thing to have somebody there holding us accountable so that we actually get this stuff done. And that's the biggest challenge that I, as a business owner, have. And I imagine you hear this all the time, Warren, with your existing clients, is just the value is really in that accountability, and then obviously tapping into your expertise. The fact that you've gone through this before is just huge. So yeah, it's very important. We do have another question here. Thank you so much. Emma says, It sounds like she's in the events and AV services business potentially. So she's asking what additional recommendations you might have for companies in that industry in which they're having massive events, postponed or canceled altogether. And I know through SARS, you had a few clients that you shared with me who you were working with on that. So if you wanted to share any other specific
so there's a few things. The first thing to
fantastic.
remember is that in this period, we're experiencing a collapse in demand, right? So initiatives and sales techniques and things like that aren't going to create demand where it doesn't exist, right? So a lot of these organizations, they've been told they can't get people together. So legally, ethically, they're not allowed to bring people of more than 10 or 15 people together at a time. So there's no sales technique that's going to allow you to overcome that. So you've got a few things to think about. One is intense cash flow management in the near term. Secondly is long-term planning. People who are doing massive events, they need to still do events. They still do need to bring people together. So talking to them about their long-term needs, like locking in people now for events in anywhere from October to March. Third, you have to look hard and look fast at online meetings and online events. So Seth Godin yesterday actually just did a really good blog post about online meetings and how tools like Zoom allow you to do breakout groups. And if you can look it up, Seth Godin is his name, look up his blog. He had a really good way of sort of creating high impact, highly relational events through an online experience. You can also, depending on what your cash reserves are, there's some really cool stuff happening with augmented reality and virtual reality. You can video somebody live, so they're not an avatar, they're actually a person on screen, and then plop people into a virtual reality environment where they can communicate with people sitting next to them in that environment. So part of the event business, I think, it's going to go through some transformations anyway. If you can come out the other end of that being more forward thinking and more progressive, using technology in interesting ways, you might be able to lure some of those people to start booking you in faster. Right, a lot of them aren't going to make a decision right now to do events in April and May. But if you say, look, that event was really important. Here's a thing we could pull together in 2 months to get everybody together through a virtual event. And you, company that are hiring us, you get to point out to your employees or people who are going to come to this event, look how committed we are to ensuring you all get together. We're innovative, we're progressive, and we look for solutions to ensure that we can bring you all together. Right, so there's a good brand impact for the companies that do it, and then there's a good client relation piece for you. And then sometimes it's hard pivots too. Like, what if you're an event company? What other expertise do you have? You have planning expertise. You have probably HR expertise. You have, depending on how you do events, you have expertise in how to motivate people. You may need to take some of that expertise and deploy it through new service offerings. maybe you do educational events or team training in an organization through lunch and learns and that kind of thing to get them motivated. Do some really hard creative thinking about not what your service is, but what your expertise is, what your skills are, and how they can be deployed in new areas. And you may wind up pivoting the business.
Okay, so it looks like we're all out of questions. So I want to, on behalf of all small businesses across Canada, say thank you so much, Warren. We've gotten lots of thanks in the chat as well for what you put together here. I know it was very, very short notice. I love the fact that you saw this crisis was going to hit all these small businesses, and you really jumped in there and put together a great presentation of great actionable information that businesses are going to be able to implement right away. So I hope some other people have had the opportunity to take advantage of that program that you've got. Again, only 15 spots in total, and they're going fast. So if you're interested, get in on that right away. And there will be an email that will get sent out with follow-up notes, the plan, documents, the tools, and so on for everybody. So that will get sent out fairly shortly. If the recording works successfully, which fingers crossed it did, we don't know for sure, just because Webinar Jam is saying that there could be some issues, just like we're seeing with dropouts there today. So if it is available, we will definitely be sending links out so everybody can rewatch this and share it amongst their network of other business owners as well. So thank you so much, Warren.
Keep your head up and keep working hard, and just look after each other in the community, look after each other in your businesses, and we will get through it as we have got through every other one of these in the past.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
Alrighty.
Warren. I
Take
think
care,
you've
everybody.
got the button to turn her off. So take care, everybody. Stay safe.